Howdy, I'm Honey, and welcome to the first episode of Savephiles, a series where we analyze the interesting uses and history of save files within video games.
Today we're going to be discussing Hideo Kojima's work on Metal Gear Solid and the technological context in which Mantis was designed. So, this is your formal warning that there will be some spoilers for Metal Gear Solid on the PS1 in this video, but we really won't be going too much into the story. We'll also be very, very briefly discussing these games. And with that out of the way,
has this ever happened to you?
I can see into your mind. So, you like suikoden. So, you like Azure Dreams? You like Castlevania, don't you? You enjoy role-playing games. I see that you enjoy Konami games.
As a kid in 1998, seeing this boss read your PS1's data like an open book was utterly terrifying, and nearly 3 decades later, it's still quite unusual to see a game accessing save files that you didn't directly ask it to. So, when a character like Mantis cracks a joke about your affinity for Castlevania, alarm bells start ringing. Hideo Kojima, the director of Metal Gear Solid, is known for his subversive and experimental work on video games, but did you know that getting this fourth wall breaking data was no easy task? Save files are an integral aspect for nearly every single modern video game, holding together the very foundation of a player's progress and achievements. It's a luxury to be able to set down a game console and to come back to it at any time as if nothing's changed. But what if your favorite video game had suddenly read the save file of a different game? Why do we remember Mantis? Before we can understand why Mantis left such an impact on players in 1998, we need to understand how we arrived at this point. For the first 2 decades of video games, the closest thing to a save file would be high scores on an arcade cabinet. The first time players would actually be able to save their progress was on computer games like Zork, an early text-based adventure game developed by Infocom in 1979. Tech publication InfoWorld said Zork's save games allowed users to experiment with different approaches to the same situation. These consoles would utilize both internal storage through magnetic encoding as well as removable storage media like floppy disks. Now that data could be stored on the computer itself, it was theoretically possible for 2 separate video games to access the same file, and we would first see this method utilized in the Quest for Glory franchise. Quest for Glory was a series of role-playing point-and-click adventure games developed by Sierra Online for personal computers starting in 1989. When the second game of the series was released, users were able to transfer their save data from the first game to the second via floppy disk. For more seasoned users, it was also possible to access the save data from the computer without a floppy disk, but it was much more difficult. Character transferring was particularly important for Quest for Glory because it was a pioneer of allowing meaningful character customization, as solutions to puzzles would depend on the player's chosen class. Transferring characters between games would then be adopted by most computer-based RPGs of the 90s. But while computers were already capable of allowing 2 separate games to communicate between one another, video game consoles were severely behind. Magnetic encoding, or any other mainstream method of writing data, was just too expensive to mass-produce for console developers, so consoles like the SNES and Sega Genesis had no means of storing extra data on the hardware itself, and without a hub for multiple games' data, it simply wasn't possible to communicate between games. Despite not having a way to locally store save data, developers still found workarounds to save the player's progress. Rather than writing data onto the actual consoles, games would store data within the game cartridge itself. But magnetic encoding was still far too expensive, so game cartridges would utilize battery-backed SRAM for data storage. This specialized chip needed to be powered at all times, requiring a small battery within the cartridge itself to sort of trick the game into thinking it was running, even if the console itself was powered off. If that battery were to run out of charge, all of the data would be lost instantly. Early Pokemon cartridges, the original Zelda, and some Nintendo 64 cartridges utilized SRAM, and unfortunately, most of their batteries have already died. Some cartridges, like Mario 64, were lucky enough to avoid this battery issue as they used electrically erasable programmable read-only memory, or EEPROM. But it was too expensive for larger save files, so it wasn't as common as alternative save methods. Even with save files being locked away in their respective cartridges, Nintendo was still finding workarounds to allow games to communicate with one another using the game link cable. If the cartridge needed to be plugged in to load its save file, why not just use 2 Game Boys to load 2 cartridges at the same time? And that's exactly what Nintendo did. But while linking up 2 consoles for multiplayer interaction was the perfect first step in transferring a player's data between games, we wouldn't actually see save data being transferred through the link cable until the Game Boy Advance with the Game Boy Advance link cable in 2001. which allowed players choices in the game Golden Sun to carry over to the game's sequel, Golden Sun: The Lost Age. The truth is, transferring data is very hard to do if the game cartridge and the save data are married. Easily allowing games to reference other games' save data only first became possible in the mid-90s with the 5th generation of consoles, the Sega Saturn and PS1, since those were the first two major systems to actually divorce a save file from the game disc. With game data being stored on consoles within a specialized chip, it was even easier to access and interact with the player's save data than it had been on older computer games like Quest for Glory, not even needing user intervention. So, 1994, with the release of the 5th generation consoles, was the first year in which games would finally be able to access another game's save data without the player's direct interference. With all of the pieces in place, it was finally possible for Hideo Kojima to terrify millions of children. But what makes this moment in Metal Gear Solid so much more noteworthy than any of the other boss fights or story beats in the game? The answer is in the metagameplay. Players take certain conventions for granted to fluently navigate through a game, even if they know nothing about it. The pixels in Pong never leave the boundaries of your CRT TV, the characters in Fallout New Vegas don't remember when you betrayed them in that deleted save, and NPCs certainly do not ever know about the other games you've been playing. When such conventions are transgressed, we can no longer rely on our intuitions and have no choice but to engage with the game as an equal. By the time the PS1 had come out in 1994, most players had grown accustomed to the prototypical save system, something that went on behind the scenes and only needed to be considered as a feature within each discrete game itself. And at the same time, while saves were finally becoming commonplace for the average household console, it was still a slow transition. Since 5th generation consoles didn't come with memory cards out of the box, and the PS1 only really had enough data to play a couple games at most, many games still utilized workarounds for storing data like password saves, strings of characters that encoded the game's state that players could input to resume their progress. So, with streamlined saves still being relatively new when Mantis said,
I can see into your mind.
It wasn't just something that had never happened before. It wasn't just a fourth wall break that scared little kids. It was something that was nearly impossible and had simply been impossible until the day some starry-eyed player walked into that office within the Shadow Moses facility for the first time. With the release of the GameCube in 2001, Nintendo fans were finally able to experience the magical world of on-console storage, memory cards sold separately. Fittingly then, one of the first times the GameCube was truly able to utilize this new technical ability was in the remake of Metal Gear Solid for the GameCube called Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes just 6 years later. Psycho Mantis would now make quips about the various Nintendo games you'd played, scaring Mario Sunshine lovers all across the world.
You've been playing Super Mario Sunshine, haven't you?
And the reason Konami was able to port Metal Gear Solid to the GameCube 6 years later without it feeling overdone was because it was so revolutionary. Even in a new generation of consoles, Psycho Mantis' fourth wall-breaking boss fight could shake players to their cores, leaving a tangible impact, just like he still does 30 years later. Hell, I'm making a video about it today. Hideo Kojima's games are a masterclass in subverting players' expectations, and in Metal Gear Solid alone, there are countless tongue-in-cheek references and overt fourth wall breaks throughout every beat of the game. But what Psycho Mantis does is take all of what the game had previously built upon and raises the bar even further. Because by reading your own saves, your own personal experiences, what was once humorous fourth wall breaks becomes a direct attack upon you, not just some nebulous aside to an audience. When a game strips back your expectations and says plainly, I can see you, there's no longer any place to hide. Hideo Kojima utilizes Psycho Mantis to turn you into your own character within the game, distinct from Solid Snake and leaving you completely exposed. It's thrilling and it's scary, but most of all, it's memorable. Why do we remember Psycho Mantis? Because Psycho Mantis remembers you, even when you forget yourself. Hopefully this video has helped to cement the technological journey that took place before a game like Metal Gear Solid could even hope to accomplish something like reading the player's minds. If you think I missed anything, please let me know in the comments section. I'm really glad that people are having fun listening to my funny little rants about video game history, and I hope I can continue to do it for a long time. If you want to help make that dream a reality, please feel free to subscribe. I try to get a new video out every month. If you're jonesing to see more right now, you can watch my previous videos here. And thank you so much for watching. Really, it means a lot.